The WNBA season has come to a close, and the main talking point post All-Star break is who will take home this year's MVP award. How did we get here? What does most valuable mean anyways? And who has the best case? Let's talk about it. But first, the end blog, the show notes at theshownotes.beehive.com, link below, featuring my weekly sports watch guide. Great way to keep track of everything going on, including the WNBA playoffs. This W season has been chaotic and entertaining. Honestly, I need to do an episode looking back at my preseason predictions to see how those held up. Specifically in terms of the MVP award conversation, we had a couple of surprise contenders step forward. If I told you that Caitlin Clark, who many thought would win MVP this season, would only play 13 games, a lot of people would have expected the Fever to be a lottery team, but Kelsey Mitchell had an absolutely fantastic season. Similar story for Alysha Gray of the Atlanta Dream. She put up career numbers across the board as she helped Atlanta have their best regular season ever, despite Ryan Howard missing some time due to injury. Along the way, Gray also became the only guard ever to be named Player of the Month 3 times in a single season. I don't know if it's her personality or what, but she's still underrated as far as I'm concerned, at least. Just a dog on the court on both ends. Now, Mitchell and Gray were both fantastic, as I said, but the pack started separating a bit when it came to the MVP conversation specifically. Gray is elite defensively, but doesn't quite have the offensive ceiling as the other players we're going to talk about. And on the flip side, Mitchell is improved on the defensive end, but isn't quite the defensive force that any of these players are. And the Fever kind of struggled towards the end of the season as everybody started getting hurt. But they did still hang on to make the postseason. However, it was closer than I think they thought it was going to be. But again, exceptional seasons by both. I'd have Mitchell 5th, although there were a couple players deserving of that spot, possibly even her own teammate Aaliyah Boston. Gray is the clear-cut 4th for me. 3rd, somewhat controversially probably on my imaginary ballot, is Alyssa Thomas of the Phoenix Mercury. Now, I say somewhat controversially because Alyssa should receive some first place votes in her first season in Phoenix. She has led the Mercury to their best season in terms of winning percentage since 2014. She's done that in spite of key pieces like Kalia Copper missing time and just a lot of new faces in the mix. Her numbers are always ridiculous, but they were even more ridiculous this season. She almost averaged a triple-double with a shade under 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists per game. These are 40-minute games. She finishes the season 3rd in the league in rebounds per game and 1st in assists per game. She averages 3 more assists per game than Courtney Williams, who's 2nd. That gap is as wide as the gap between 2nd place and 25th place. I think it was Nikias Duncan who tweeted the other day that Alyssa has created more points off of her assists alone than every other player except for Kelsey Mitchell and A'ja Wilson have scored. On top of that, she's top 5 in most meaningful advanced defensive metrics. Sounds pretty valuable, so why is she only 3rd on my ballot? The Mercury, or really any team, are only going to be so bad if Alyssa is on the roster. This is a prerequisite for MVP, in my opinion. You can't be MVP if your team stinks, and an Alyssa Thomas-led team will not stink over the course of a now 44-game season. The other side of that is how high a player lifts their team. You hear floor raiser versus ceiling raiser all the time in sports. To me, an MVP has to be both. Alyssa Thomas does both. However, she doesn't quite do them as well as A'ja Wilson and Napheesa Collier. This is mostly a product of her playing style with her scoring limitations, mostly lack of range due to a history of shoulder injuries. Teams have a pretty good idea of what she's going to do, what she wants to do. The fact that she's still able to do it is a testament to how great she is, but she does have a hard time lifting the Mercury against the best in the league. You can see this in Phoenix's record against the 3 teams ahead of them in the standings, Minnesota, Atlanta, and Las Vegas. They are a combined 2-9 against those teams. Now, I'm not saying Alyssa Thomas is the reason for these losses, but this is something that we have to pick apart when trying to decide who the most valuable player is. You just can't be most valuable against teams who are worse than your team. And to make matters worse, down the stretch, as they were fighting to be one of those elite teams, they suffered losses to 2 non-playoff teams in the Sparks and the Sun. Those were close losses, but again, with her scoring limitations, she can't necessarily just go get you a bucket like Phee or A'ja can. Defenses can force her to operate from the perimeter more or make her lean more into her playmaking, which is putting the fate of the game into a lesser player's hands. That can lead to some embarrassing losses down the stretch. So, while she's had an amazing season, she's not the most valuable player this year. However, being a top 3 player in the W isn't exactly the worst thing in the world. And I think when you're at this level of trying to decide who's the best of the best, it's more about who has separated themselves the most. And Napheesa Collier and A'ja Wilson have separated themselves from the rest of the league entirely. Alyssa is certainly in her own tier, but that tier is a tier below Phee and A'ja. Not necessarily anything she did wrong, but she just wasn't as right as those two were, if that makes any sense. So those are the top 2 MVP candidates this season to me. Let's look at some of the arguments I've seen for each. Then I'll get into what my definition of most valuable player is and which one of them fits that criteria the best this season. Let's start with the silliest of these arguments, head-to-head matchups that's been used by Phee supporters this season, as she and the Lynx have dominated everybody this season. The Aces are included in that everybody, and Minnesota has gone 3-1 against them, with 2 of those wins being blowouts of 31 and 53 points. The reason this is so silly is because it's such a small sample size of each player's body of work. No, you don't want your MVP to come out and repeatedly lay an egg against one specific team or player, and you don't want them to struggle to win every game against the teams at the top of the league, like Alyssa and the Mercury have. But you can't reduce the season to 4 games or 1 game like I saw some people doing when the Aces finally beat the Lynx. Even if you were to do this, how would you decide which player is more valuable? Phee's team has more wins against A'ja, but A'ja has put up better numbers in those matchups. So now what? It's a more specific version of another MVP argument that I'm not a fan of, the best player on the best team argument. Again, this would go to Phee this year, but it just feels like a lazy argument to me. Can the MVP be the best player on the best team? Of course, but that hasn't always been the case, nor should it be. And if you're a Phee supporter, you can certainly come up with a better case for her than that. It's also the flip side of an argument that's being made in favor of A'ja, which is that the MVP should go to the best player in the league. It certainly does a lot of time. There's a lot of overlap between the best player on the best team and the best player overall. And A'ja Wilson is the best player on the planet. She might be the best player I've ever seen, but I don't think that means she should necessarily win MVP every year if she doesn't earn it. So what does earn it mean to me? My MVP is the player who has the most positive impact on their team's overall performance. It's possible for the best player in the world to not have the most positive impact, just like it's possible for the best player on the best team to not have the most positive impact. When I'm looking at positive impact, I'm looking at how well the player is playing on both ends of the court, how much their play is affecting their team's overall play, and how much that's helping their team win. So I guess it's a bit of a combination of the best player and the best player on the best team arguments. But I would like to think it's a little bit more nuanced and gives us a more complete picture, even though we can't have a complete picture. And this is all subjective, but we're going to yell and argue about it anyways. Now, even with me having this criteria that I believe in and I think is right, it hasn't made a decision this year any easier, but for much of the season, it looked like it had because Phee was running away with it. The Lynx were on a mission to avenge their brutal Game 5 loss in last year's finals, and she was leading the way. And there probably wouldn't be a debate or a need for this episode if the season had ended August 2nd. That was the day the Lynx drilled the Aces by 53 points that I just talked about. They had completely dismantled them. That win gave the Lynx a 24-5 record, and Phee had played in 26 of those games and looked very much like the best player this season, no matter how you feel about A'ja overall. Offensively, nobody could stop her. Super efficient, 23.5 points per game on 54% from the field, 37% from 3, 91% from the line. I don't know how much playing in Unrivaled translates to the W since they are 2 wildly different playing styles, but it did look like the confidence she played with there did. And she also defended the way you would expect a reigning defensive player of the year to defend, a block and a half and nearly 2 steals per game at that point, along with 7.5 rebounds. A big reason why she was running away with it was her individual play combined with her team's play compared to how Asia and the Aces were doing. That 53-point loss dropped Las Vegas to 14-14 as they were trying to hold on to a playoff spot. A 10-win gap is too big to justify naming one player MVP over another if the level of individual play is even close. And not only was it close at that point, but Phee was actually playing better. However, while there was a gap between the two individually, I don't think it was nearly as big as what Phee supporters have tried to claim. Through that game, Asia had played in 24 of the Aces' 28 games. She was averaging 21.5 points, 2 fewer than Phee, and was doing so less efficiently on 49% from the field to Phee's 54, 28% from 3 to Phee's 37, and 83% from the line to Phee's 91. Defensively, it's tough to say. Everyone likes to pretend they know everything, but evaluating team defense and individual defense in basketball is tough. There's so many different factors at play. They are both fantastic defenders. Phee looks slightly better up to that point, but how much of that is related to the defender she has alongside her? Alana Smith may very well be named Defensive Player of the Year this season. That is a huge help to have. If we look at their defensive stats, they were pretty similar. Asia was averaging more rebounds at 9 per game to Phee's 7.5, and slightly more blocks at 2.3 to Phee's just over 1.5. They were almost identical in steals per game. And then circling back offensively, they were almost identical in terms of assists and turnovers per game. Asia's biggest problem up to that point, other than wins and losses, which again do matter to a degree, is that she wasn't playing up to her own standard. I mean, she's coming off the most impressive individual season in the history of the league that earned her the first unanimous MVP award in the history of the league. If all things were equal, but we gave her numbers through August 2nd to player Y, who didn't have to live up to being A'ja Wilson, then player Y is probably talked about a little bit more positively in terms of the MVP conversation. Again, it still would have been Phee's award, and there was a huge gap between team play and a gap between individual play, but I don't think that individual play gap was quite what it's been made out to be. And again, that closed very quickly as a result of that August 2nd game because Phee got hurt late in the third quarter. I still don't know why she was in the game. They were up by 8 million points. That happens a lot in the W. I don't understand it. Take your starters out, especially this season where the schedule is ridiculous. It's very rare that a player actually suffers an injury under these circumstances, but when it happens, you look like a jackass, and it happened here. Phee missed 3 weeks. Those are 3 weeks where she was contributing nothing to her team, making no positive impact. Now, the Lynx still won when she was out because they're a great team with great players. To me, this does not detract from Phee's MVP case. Those games were way closer than they probably would have been if she had played. Her on-off numbers basically confirm that, and she makes them a title contender when she plays versus a good team when she doesn't play. It's the not being able to contribute for those 7 games that really hurt her. That's a lot of games missed. She's now missed more games than any other MVP ever, both by total number of games and percentage of the season. However, she might still have won easily if nothing else had changed, but some things did in a big way. The biggest thing was the Las Vegas Aces play as a team. Remember, that was the biggest gap. They did not lose a game after that 53-point blowout to the Lynx. They won 16 games in a row, which is tied for the second longest win streak in the history of the WNBA. They're now the 2 seed. Now, like with the Lynx and Napheesa, there are team dynamics to consider for sure. Becky Hammon finally moved Jewel Lloyd to the bench where she's thrived. That's opened things up for other players. They got an Alyssa Smith. A couple of things have happened, but also, like with the Lynx and Napheesa, the main story is the brilliance of their star player. A'ja has been absurd. During that stretch, she averaged 26 points per game on 53% from the field, 59% from 3 on nearly 2 attempts per game, and 89% from the free throw line. That includes 8 30-plus point games, including the first ever 30-20 game in the WNBA. She averaged 12 rebounds per game during that stretch, also averaged 2.5 assists, a steal and a half, and 2 blocks per game. And it's not like they were just beating up on terrible teams. 9 of those wins were against playoff teams, including the Lynx with Phee back, and 2 wins apiece against the Mercury and the Dream, who are each top 4 seeds. Since August 2nd, A'ja has been the best at a level that rivals what she did last season against the best teams down the stretch when her team needed her to do it. Her early season slump, and I use the word slump with the heaviest of air quotes, was overblown due to how bad the Aces were as a team, but much like how the Lynx won by more with Phee on the floor versus off of it, the Aces would have won fewer games without A'ja, and the losses they did suffer would have been even worse, so their individual positive impact was more similar than people would have you believe. With that being the case, Phee needed that team gap to remain close to the same to have a chance with her games missed. That didn't happen. There was a 10-game gap through 28 games, which is huge. That turned into just a 4-game gap over 44 games, which is not huge. Then on top of that, the individual play advantage that Phee had flipped in favor of A'ja, even considering that Phee, when she came back, she maintained for the most part her level of play that she was playing at pre-injury. The way it ended up on a league-wide scale, Phee ended up leading in 0 major statistical categories. A'ja led in points per game and blocks per game while finishing second in rebounds per game. Comparing more stats between the two, Phee averaged 0.1 more assists per game, and they're tied for steals per game. I will say Napheesa still does hold that efficiency edge. This is probably her most impressive accomplishment this season. She became the second player ever to join the 50-40-90 club, along with Elena Delle Donne when she won MVP in 2019, and Phee was the first to do it while averaging 20-plus points per game. However, that gap has closed too, as A'ja finished the season shooting 50.5% from the field, while Phee finished shooting 53% from the field. And A'ja shoots 1.5 threes per game to Phee's nearly 4 a game, but A'ja made 42% of them on the season, while Phee made 40%. Both incredible percentages. And if you're into advanced stats, those favor A'ja for the most part as well. She leads the league in player efficiency rating, which measures per minute production, and total win shares, which estimates how many wins a player contributes to. Phee's right behind her in both of those and also leads A'ja in win shares per 40 minutes. But again, to me, this all comes down to those missed games. We can get into all kind of hypotheticals of, well, Phee would have played even better if she were healthy, or maybe Phee was due for a slump if she had been playing, or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that she didn't play. It is unfortunate, but that is basketball. And while A'ja did miss 4 games of her own, she still played in 7 more games than Phee, and that matters in a 44-game season. You have to play to contribute to your team. Phee got hurt and she couldn't contribute. To have maintained that edge that she had, despite missing all those games, she would have had to been playing at an insanely productive level, historic level. And she wasn't quite there, and even worse for her, A'ja Wilson was. A'ja Wilson is the 2025 WNBA Most Valuable Player. She wasn't on August 2nd, but the season does not end on August 2nd. Will I be up in arms if Phee wins it? No. These are 2 incredible players who are each deserving. Hell, if they gave it to Alyssa Thomas, she deserves it too. I will remain calm. But if it were up to me, and it should be, then A'ja Wilson deserves that award the most. More interesting to me is the fact that Phee appears to have cemented her place as the second best player in the league after it being a back and forth between A'ja and Stewie for so long. And whatever her injury might have cost her in terms of individual awards, it might end up being a blessing in disguise. She came back with enough time to appear to regain her form heading into the playoffs, but she should also have fresh legs as a result of missing that time while everyone was out here playing. And if I had to guess, she'll be more than happy taking home a championship and a finals MVP instead. As for A'ja, I don't know what else you can say about her, but just be happy you get to watch her. All right, that will do it for this episode. I look forward to the comments because I know how some of y'all can get when talking about WNBA. But for those of you who are reasonable, thank you for watching, listening, rating, subscribing, reviewing, and sharing. Do not forget to check out the Nameless College Football Show every Wednesday, where me and Petey talk about college football. It's right there. It doesn't have a name, but it does have college football in the name. What more do you need? Beyond the Bark, where my dog Kobe makes his NFL picks every Thursday. And subscribe to my blog, The Show Notes.